Hello and welcome to IBTimes TV. I'm Leanna Brinded, Business Editor for the International Business Times. Joining me now is Paul Morris. He's the Managing Director of Tocardo UK. So hi Paul.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good. Well, excitingly for the UK, having a cleaner and more sustainable energy future seems like it's becoming a reality. So how in terms of tidal energy would that transform the UK's energy needs?
Well, tidal energy could account for between 5 and 10% of UK's needs. And it's had a bit of a slow start, but it's coming on quite well now, and we're on course to do just that in a few years' time, I think.
Okay, and so, especially when it comes to sustainable energy, there needs to be a lot of input from the government in terms of whether it's initiatives, tax breaks and so forth. But do you feel that the British government, whether this one or the last, have really done enough to stimulate growth in this area?
Well, if you look at what's going on the planet, the UK government's probably leading at the moment. It's with the latest announcement about strike prices, or the draft strike price, being at £305 a megawatt hour, it looks like the UK government's now put itself on a par with Canada and Japan in terms of feed-in tariffs for the industry. So it's going the right way, I think, yeah.
And do you think, but for producers, do you think there's enough in terms of focusing on maybe better tax breaks or relief for companies?
Oh, absolutely. There's always room for better tax breaks and relief for companies building turbines or building foundations or anything to do with the industry at all. There could be more being done, I guess, but these things take time to organise, and there's always something extra you can do to help the businesses.
Well, what's really interesting is that though it's a UK-based company, you do a lot of business overseas and some in major markets around the world. So could you explain or maybe pinpoint some real areas of growth that Tocardo are finding at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Most of the growth comes from areas with strong tides, obviously, because tides convert into energy, which converts into revenue. So we're confined really where all these tides are. Now, that ranges from Korea and Japan in the Far East right through to the western side of Canada. South America, for instance, is a growth market for us. Even the Middle East and some of the places where they've got strong riverine flows, that's their revenue generating areas for us, if you will. So we're taking pains now to expand out into these places and have framework agreements in the Far West, in Canada. It looks like we're going to have one in the US shortly, and also in Japan and Korea.
Well, when it comes to, I suppose, the export costs or export environment to these countries, how have you found the differences in terms of whether it's the infrastructure or tax or any other elements that affect that?
Well, that's a very good question. There are a number of areas where we are confined to how much we can build in a particular country. Japan is one of those. Japan will always want to prefer to have their own technology, or for us to manufacture under license in Japan in order to get things done there, in order to install there. Likewise, on the other side of the world, in the US and Canada, there are also restrictions that we have to go through. None of them are insurmountable. We can always change to suit the way of doing business there. That's all, and that's in fact what we're doing right now. But yes, there are always considerations about how you export to people, what you're exporting to people, and the revenue you generate in those countries, where that goes as well. That's a price you pay for doing business there.
Sure. And I know, like you're saying, for the business, it's confined at the moment to areas which has very strong tidal waves naturally. But are there any countries or maybe bigger regions that you are seeing as a great potential for growth, even eventually, in the long term for the company?
Yes, Nepal's a classic case, if you like. Nepal has an infrastructure which is not a grid infrastructure, which is not very good. And it's very mountainous, it's very expensive to put a grid there. But they've got a lot of high or fast-flowing rivers, if you like. So we go to these places and we're installing there in community projects. Now where we're installing just a few megawatts on a river and plugging it straight into the towns and the villages that need it. So that's a tremendous growth area for us. And that's spreading out even as far as the UK even. Community projects are just starting to happen in the UK, where they are a long way from the grid, or the price of power is too expensive, or they want to do something because they recognise a fast-flowing river or a fast-flowing tidal resource on their own doorsteps.
Great. And I mean, rounding off, I mean, with an industry like this, what's exciting about it is that technology is always developing to bring, better products to the market. You've got quite a few at the moment, but you can tell me a bit about the R&D or maybe other areas where you're looking at refining certain products for the market?
Yeah, as we are going through a bit of a dilemma right now on whether or not to increase the size of our turbines, because clearly we're doing well with the smaller turbines. We're wondering if we should make larger ones. So we're steering away from that decision just now, but what we are doing is increasing the levels of technology in our current pieces of equipment, increasing the power outputs of the turbines we're actually manufacturing. We're always going through testing and trialling and winding in the knowledge from those into our current range of turbines, yeah.
Okay, well thank you very much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
And that was Paul Morris, Managing Director of Tocardo UK.